I stood outside Emily's office door, breathing hard as I forced myself to walk back in. When she saw me, she didn't jump or panic. She just stared like I was an interruption. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cracking. She crossed her arms. "About what?" "You know what I heard," I whispered. "You and Daniel." She didn't flinch. "So you were spying." "I brought you dinner," I said. "I wanted to surprise you." "I didn't expect to hear that." She sighed like I was bothering her. "Look, I'm tired of pretending. I deserve better than this life. Better than you." "Better?" I stepped closer. "Emily, I've given everything." "And it still wasn't enough," she snapped. "Daniel gives me stability, status, a real future." "I thought we were building a future," I said. She shook her head. "You're too soft, too emotional. I can't spend my life carrying dead weight." My chest tightened. "Dead weight? Is that really what you think of me?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look uncomfortable. Daniel stepped out of her office then, buttoning his coat. "I was wondering when you'd come back." "Stay out of this," I said. He smirked. "What? This concerns me. She's with me now." "I'm still her husband," I said, my hands trembling. Daniel laughed softly. "Not for long. Men like you always stay at the bottom. You work, you sweat, you hope, and you still lose." "Stop," I said, though my voice was barely there. Emily looked at me like I was a stranger. "Just leave. I'm done." I stared at her, searching for the woman I knew. "Emily, don't do this." "I already did," she said. I walked out because staying hurt too much. At home, the silence felt heavier than my thoughts. Minutes later, the door opened. Emily stepped in without meeting my eyes. "I'm packing," she said flatly. "Can we at least talk?" I asked. "There's nothing to talk about." She moved quickly, pulling clothes from drawers. "Was any of it real?" I whispered. "It was real until it wasn't," she said. "People change." I changed. "Because of him?" She zipped a suitcase. "Because I want a better life." "Emily, please," I said, reaching out. "Don't throw everything away." She stepped back. "I already made my choice." Daniel honked outside. She grabbed her suitcase. "Goodbye," she said, not turning around. The door closed and something inside me collapsed. I dropped to the floor and covered my face. Why wasn't I enough? I whispered into the empty room. I stayed there, shaking, trying to breathe through the pain that swallowed everything. I pressed my forehead to the cold floor, listening to the memory of her voice fading. Was I really so easy to replace? I asked the darkness. No answer came, only my own breathing shaking in the silence. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled, dropping me back down. How did everything fall apart so fast? I whispered. The room felt colder than it ever had, like her absence sucked the warmth out of the air. I touched the spot where her picture used to sit and felt my chest twist. "I tried," I said softly. "I gave you everything I had." But in the end, I realized I was talking to someone who would never hear me again. I wiped my face with shaking hands. Every breath felt heavy, like the room itself pushed down on me. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, trying not to fall apart again. But the truth was simple. I had already fallen apart. "Emily," I said as I pushed open the office door, my voice trembling. "We need to talk." She looked at me like I was an interruption, not her husband. "What now?" "I heard you," I whispered. "Everything you said. Everything you did." She crossed her arms. "Then good. Saves me the trouble." "The trouble?" I stepped closer. "Emily, please, just tell me what's happening to us." "There is no us anymore," she said coldly. "I'm done pretending." My throat tightened. "Pretending?" "Emily, I thought we were building a life." "You were," she said. "I outgrew it." "I outgrew you?" I repeated, barely breathing. "No," she replied. "I outgrew your small dreams. Your small life." My voice cracked. "I'm trying my best." "I deserve better," she interrupted. "Better than watching you struggle for scraps." I felt my chest tighten. "Is that why you chose him?" She didn't even blink. "Daniel offers stability, status, a future that actually means something. And I don't." I asked. "You don't offer anything anymore," she said. "You're tired, weak, always trying but never getting anywhere." I froze. "Emily, how can you say that after everything I've done for us?" "That's the problem," she snapped. "You think effort is enough. I'm tired of carrying dead weight." The words cut deeper than anything I'd ever heard. Dead weight? Before I could say anything else, Daniel walked in, adjusting his cuffs like he owned the room. "Well," he said with a smirk. Looks like the husband finally caught up. I glared at him. Stay out of this. Why? He asked casually. This concerns me. More than him, actually. Daniel, I said through clenched teeth, you ruined my marriage. He laughed. Your marriage was already ruined. I just showed her the difference between climbing and sinking. Don't talk like you know me, I snapped. I don't need to know you, he said. I already know your type. Men like you stay at the bottom. Emily didn't defend me. She didn't even look at me. I swallowed hard. Emily, if there's anything left between us, anything at all, just tell me. She shook her head. There's nothing left. I'm done here. Daniel stepped beside her, slipping a hand on her waist like I never existed. We should go, he told her. I stared at her, hoping for even a flicker of hesitation. Emily, please. She stepped past me without a second glance. Move. I have things to finish. I followed them out of the office, my legs shaking. Outside the building, she turned to me with a bored expression. I'm going home to get my things, she said. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. How can you say that so easily? I whispered. Because it is easy, she replied. We're over. The ride home was silent. She didn't look at me once. Inside the apartment, she opened the closet and said, This won't take long. Emily, I begged. Please, talk to me. Tell me what I did wrong. You didn't do anything, she said. You're just not enough. I can change, I said desperately. Just give me a chance. I don't want you to change, she replied. I want someone better. I felt something collapse inside me. So that's it. I was just temporary. She zipped her suitcase. Don't make this dramatic. I loved you, I whispered. She shrugged. And I'm sure you'll love someone else eventually. Emily. She opened the door. Goodbye. I watched her walk out of my life without hesitation, without guilt, without a single tear. The moment the door shut, I fell to my knees. I wasn't enough, I whispered. I really wasn't enough. The silence swallowed me whole. My chest tightened until breathing hurt. Hot tears blurred everything around me. I lost her, I choked. And she never even looked back. I covered my face with my hands and broke down completely, the weight of humiliation and heartbreak crushing every part of me. I don't know how to survive this, I whispered into the empty room. But there was no answer. Only the sound of my own sobbing. I couldn't breathe for days, and every morning felt heavier than the last as I woke with Emily's betrayal echoing through my shattered mind again. Liam showed up uninvited, kicking my door open and shouting, Get up, man, because I'm not letting you rot in this pathetic darkness right now. I whispered that I couldn't eat, sleep, or even think, and he glared at me like he wanted to shake sense back into me now. You trusted her too much, he said, but that doesn't mean you get to destroy yourself, so stand up and fight for your damn life. I tried returning to work, but my mind stayed blank, and missing deadlines pushed me closer to losing the job I still desperately needed today. Bills piled up fast because I'd spent everything trying to build Emily a future, and now the debt followed me like a shadow refusing mercy. One night the rain hammered down so hard I couldn't hear my thoughts, and I walked to the bridge hoping the storm might drown everything. I leaned on the railing, shaking, and whispered, Maybe this is where it ends, even though part of me begged for any reason to stay. A soft voice behind me said, Please don't, and I turned to see a woman with soaked hair watching me like she knew my pain. She stepped closer and said, I'm Sophie and I don't know you, but no one should face something like this alone, not in the rain. I told her I didn't want saving, but she shook her head and said she wasn't leaving until I stepped back and promised I'd try. Her voice trembled when she said she had seen too many people fall apart, and she didn't want me becoming another silent loss on hers. I stepped back, shaking hard, and she sighed with relief before telling me she wasn't judging me and only wanted me to breathe for one. I asked why she cared, and she said sometimes strangers see pain clearer than friends, because friends get scared and don't know how to reach. She walked me back from the edge and stayed beside me until my shaking slowed, telling me the storm would pass and I wasn't alone. Liam called later, yelling that I scared him, but when I told him about Sophie he went quiet and said maybe I finally met someone. I admitted I didn't know what she meant to me yet, but her voice kept echoing in my mind long after the rain stopped there. I lay awake replaying her words, surprised a stranger's kindness hit deeper than all the empty messages from people who claimed they cared but never. Somewhere between my shaking and her gentle voice I realized I didn't want to disappear anymore, not when even one stranger believed I was still. I didn't know where healing would start, but that night on the bridge with rain soaking my clothes, I found the smallest spark left inside. Sophie didn't fix everything, but she kept me breathing long enough to remember that pain wasn't the end, and maybe tomorrow I could stand again. As I closed my eyes that night, I whispered that I wasn't healed but I was still here, and for the first time in days. "I swear you're checking on me more than the nurses," I said when Sophie knocked on my door again. "I'm making sure you don't collapse in your own thoughts," she replied. "Can I come in?" "Yeah, sure." She stepped inside and looked at me the way people look at broken things they still believe can be fixed. "How are you holding up today?" "I don't know," I said. "Some moments I feel okay. Others, it hits me again." "Talk to me," she whispered. "I keep seeing them together. Emily laughing with Daniel like I never mattered." Sophie sat on the edge of the chair. "You mattered. You still matter. Don't let what they did define you." "That's hard." "I know," she said. "But you're allowed to rebuild. Piece by piece." I rubbed my face. "Why do you care so much?" "Because I know how it feels to lose someone you trusted," she said quietly. I looked up. "Someone betrayed you too?" "Yeah. He said he loved me then left the moment someone else showed up." I felt like my heart was trash on the street. "I'm sorry," I said. She shrugged. "I'm past it now. Mostly. But it took me a long time to stop blaming myself." "That's where I'm stuck," I admitted. "I keep thinking maybe I wasn't enough." Her eyes softened. "You were enough. People who betray aren't looking for better. They're running from themselves." I let her words sink into me. "It still hurts." "It will," she said. "But not forever. Let yourself grow again." I sighed. "I'm trying." "I've seen you fight through worse," she said. "You can get through this." I gave her a weak smile. "Thanks for not judging me." "Hey," she said, nudging my arm. "I like listening to you. And I'm not going anywhere." Her confidence steadied me in ways I couldn't explain. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like warmth instead of shame. The next morning when I showed up at work, my coworkers stared. I heard one of them whisper, "Emily and Daniel came in together today." Another added, "They're basically a couple now." The words hit me like a punch, but I kept walking. Sophie met me near my desk. "You okay?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm standing. That's something." "It is," she said. "And you're stronger today than yesterday." I took a shaky breath. "I guess I am." She leaned closer. "If anyone gives you trouble, you tell me." "You're fierce," I joked. "Only for people who deserve it," she said. I chuckled for the first time in days. "I never expected you to be the person keeping me together." "Sometimes the right people show up when everything falls apart," she said. I nodded slowly. "I'm glad you did." "Good," she said. "Now let's get through the day together." I followed her through the hallway, trying to ignore the whispers behind us. "Do you think people will ever stop talking?" I asked. "People talk because it's easy," she said. "But you'll outgrow their noise." "I hope so," I murmured. She smiled. "You will. And until then you have me." "That means more than you know," I said. "Then say it," she teased. "I will," I said. "Just, not yet." She laughed softly. "Fair enough." "Really?" At work the atmosphere felt charged, and I asked Liam, "Why's everyone running around today?" And he said investors were coming to evaluate our prototype. I felt my pulse spike as I whispered, "The one I helped finish last month?" And he clapped my shoulders saying, "Yeah man, that one's getting serious attention." Mr. Johnson called me into his office and said, "Sit down, son," and I nervously asked if something was wrong because his tone felt strangely heavy now. He smiled and said, "Nothing's wrong at all," before adding, "In fact, everything is finally turning around for you," which made my confusion grow fast today. I asked what he meant, and he said investors loved the prototype, especially the parts one designed, because they said my code carried clarity and creative direction. Hearing that made my throat tighten, and I said, "I didn't think anyone noticed," while he chuckled and replied that leaders always notice the ones quietly building. He leaned back and said, "I'm retiring soon," and I almost jumped as I blurted, "Wait, what? Why now?" Because he always seemed unstoppable at work. He waved his hand gently and said he'd earned rest, then added, "But the buyers want you here as a founder," which almost knocked the air out. I said, "Founder? Me?" And he nodded, explaining that they believed my involvement was essential for future growth, and they wouldn't buy unless I stayed committed. My chest tightened with disbelief, and I said I wasn't sure I was ready, but he told me readiness was overrated and growth came from stepping into uncertainty bravely. He slid a folder toward me and said, "These are stock options and ownership terms," and I stared at them like they were written in some impossible language. "I never thought my work mattered this much," I whispered, and he replied, It always mattered, you just forgot your worth because life punched you too hard. I felt emotions boiling inside me, and I said I didn't know how to thank him, but he laughed and said gratitude wasn't needed, only determination mattered. He told me he'd watched me fall apart and rise again, and that resilience was a better indicator of leadership than talent, because broken people understand responsibility. I stepped outside his office stunned, and Sophie called me asking how my day was, so I said, "Something insane just happened," and she told me to explain. I told her about the investors, the offer, the ownership, and she gasped before saying, "You deserve this more than you realize," with warmth that steadied my voice. I admitted I felt scared, and she said fear was normal when stepping into a future I'd never believed I could reach, especially after everything Emily took. Hearing her voice made hope flicker again, and I said, "Maybe this is bigger than revenge," and she whispered, "Good, because your life is worth more." Liam met me at lunch and shouted, "Founder Hayes," embarrassing me instantly, and I told him to shut up while he laughed loudly across the entire cafeteria. I told him the offer felt unreal, and he replied, "Take it and rebuild yourself," because he believed this opportunity could rewrite everything I lost in heartbreak. Walking back to my desk, I stared at the buzzing office and whispered I wouldn't stay broken anymore, not when life finally handed me a real chance. Later Mr. Johnson passed me and said, "Decide soon," and I assured him I would, feeling a fire growing inside me stronger than any sadness remaining now. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't rising to hurt anyone. I was rising to become someone I could finally respect. That evening I looked at the city lights outside the office window and whispered, "This time I'm choosing myself," knowing this moment marked the start of everything. At work the atmosphere felt charged, and I asked Liam, "Why's everyone running around today?" And he said investors were coming to evaluate our prototype. I felt my pulse spike as I whispered, "The one I helped finish last month?" And he clapped my shoulders saying, "Yeah man, that one's getting serious attention." Mr. Johnson called me into his office and said, "Sit down, son," and I nervously asked if something was wrong because his tone felt strangely heavy now. He smiled and said, "Nothing's wrong at all," before adding, "In fact, everything is finally turning around for you," which made my confusion grow fast today. I asked what he meant, and he said investors loved the prototype, especially the parts one designed, because they said my code carried clarity and creative direction. Hearing that made my throat tighten, and I said, "I didn't think anyone noticed," while he chuckled and replied that leaders always notice the ones quietly building. He leaned back and said, "I'm retiring soon," and I almost jumped as I blurted, "Wait, what? Why now?" Because he always seemed unstoppable at work. He waved his hand gently and said he'd earned rest, then added, "But the buyers want you here as a founder," which almost knocked the air out. I said, "Founder? Me?" And he nodded, explaining that they believed my involvement was essential for future growth, and they wouldn't buy unless I stayed committed. My chest tightened with disbelief, and I said I wasn't sure I was ready, but he told me readiness was overrated and growth came from stepping into uncertainty bravely. He slid a folder toward me and said, "These are stock options and ownership terms," and I stared at them like they were written in some impossible language. "I never thought my work mattered this much," I whispered, and he replied, "It always mattered, you just forgot your worth because life punched you too hard." I felt emotions boiling inside me, and I said I didn't know how to thank him, but he laughed and said gratitude wasn't needed, only determination mattered. He told me he'd watched me fall apart and rise again, and that resilience was a better indicator of leadership than talent, because broken people understand responsibility. I stepped outside his office stunned, and Sophie called me asking how my day was, so I said, "Something insane just happened," and she told me to explain. I told her about the investors, the offer, the ownership, and she gasped before saying, "You deserve this more than you realize," with warmth that steadied my voice. I admitted I felt scared, and she said fear was normal when stepping into a future I'd never believed I could reach, especially after everything Emily took. Hearing her voice made hope flicker again, and I said, "Maybe this is bigger than revenge," and she whispered, "Good, because your life is worth more." Liam met me at lunch and shouted, "Founder Hayes," embarrassing me instantly, and I told him to shut up while he laughed loudly across the entire cafeteria. I told him the offer felt unreal, and he replied, "Take it and rebuild yourself," because he believed this opportunity could rewrite everything I lost in heartbreak. Walking back to my desk, I stared at the buzzing office and whispered I wouldn't stay broken anymore, not when life finally handed me a real chance. Later Mr. Johnson passed me and said, "Decide soon," and I assured him I would, feeling a fire growing inside me stronger than any sadness remaining now. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't rising to hurt anyone. I was rising to become someone I could finally respect. That evening I looked at the city lights outside the office window and whispered, "This time I'm choosing myself," knowing this moment marked the start of everything. The company exploded with growth faster than I imagined, and Liam asked if I was sleeping at all because I kept working every single night. I told him sleep could wait because momentum mattered now, and he laughed saying I finally sounded like someone ready to fight for real success. Money started arriving in amounts I never expected, and Sophie joked that I should hire someone to remind me to breathe before drowning in work. I told her breathing felt easier now that purpose filled me again, and she smiled saying determination suited me more than heartbreak ever did today. Meetings became intense, but I kept leading discussions confidently, surprising myself every time investors asked for my opinion before anyone else could even speak today. Mr. Johnson visited sometimes and said, "You're becoming who I knew you could be," which pushed me to work harder without fear dragging behind me. I spent late nights learning leadership and business skills, asking mentors difficult questions until they finally admitted I was improving faster than most newcomers managed. Liam teased me for turning into a workaholic, and I told him success wasn't optional anymore because my future depended on decisions I made daily. Sophie called during breaks asking if I'd eaten, and I joked that food became a luxury while she insisted progress meant nothing without health steady. As revenue climbed sharply, my confidence rose too, and I told Liam that maybe losing everything had forced me to rebuild stronger foundations than before. Rumors started spreading that Daniel's company was struggling, and coworkers whispered updates until Liam asked whether hearing that felt good after all the pain endured. I told him karma didn't excite me anymore, though part of me admitted seeing truth catch up to them felt satisfying after so many months. Emily posted glamorous photos online daily, and people commented that Daniel looked distant beside her, something that made me pause whenever comments crossed my feed. I didn't celebrate their problems, but I couldn't deny noticing how my rise seemed to mirror their slow decline in ways I never expected today. Liam smirked during a meeting and whispered, "Winning looks good on you," and I elbowed him lightly while admitting I still had mountains to climb. I kept pushing forward, telling myself every late night mattered, and Sophie reminded me gently that ambition shouldn't erase the parts of me needing rest. I told her I wasn't stopping until stability felt real, and she nodded saying purpose was good but burnout would sabotage everything I worked for. Her voice grounded me whenever pressure built, and sometimes she laughed saying I looked more alive now than when I chased love that failed me. Revenue reports arrived weekly, and I told Liam our growth reminded me healing didn't come from forgiveness but from proving I wasn't finished becoming stronger. Coworkers asked how I stayed focused, and I told them pain reshaped me completely, because surviving heartbreak taught me discipline deeper than any textbook offered. When another rumor surfaced about Daniel losing clients, Liam asked whether I felt victorious, but I told him my battle wasn't with them anymore now. I realized my growth came from discipline and courage, not revenge, and I whispered that darkness behind me finally felt smaller than hope rising ahead. Every night I reviewed goals with renewed clarity, and Sophie said she was proud of my progress, encouraging me to protect myself while climbing forward. As I looked over financial reports one evening, I whispered that I wasn't drowning anymore, and for the first time my future felt within reach. I pushed open the conference room door and felt every pair of eyes land on me, but I kept my face calm as I set my folder on the table. "Let's get started," I said, keeping my voice even. "I know why you called this," Daniel blurted as he stood. "Sit down, Daniel." He hesitated before dropping back into his chair, muttering, "I just need a chance to explain." "You had plenty of chances." "That's not fair," he said. "Everything changed so fast. I didn't know what you were planning. I didn't know you were roadmap." Emily shifted beside him, her voice softer. "Can we talk privately? Just you and me?" "We'll talk after this," I said. "But nothing you say will change the decision I'm about to make." Daniel leaned forward. "Please, man, don't do this to me. I swear I'll fix everything. I need this job." "You needed integrity more," I replied. "And respect. Both were missing." He shook his head violently. "You can't just fire me because you're trying to prove something. I'm firing you because you earned it." Silence fell. Even Emily stopped breathing for a moment. Daniel's face crumpled. "You don't understand what this will do to me." "I understand perfectly," I said. "Security will walk you out." He slammed his hand on the table but didn't argue further. He stormed out of the room with the sound of his footsteps echoing behind him. Emily exhaled shakily. "You didn't have to humiliate him like that." "He humiliated himself," I said. "Now, what did you want to tell me?" She stepped closer. "I miss the way you cared. The way you looked at me. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I'm not the man you broke, I said quietly. Tears streamed down her face. You really don't feel anything anymore? I feel clarity, I answered. And distance. Both are healthier than what we had. She wiped her cheeks. I didn't think you'd ever be this cold. I'm not cold, I said. I'm healed. There's a difference. Emily reached out as if to touch my arm. Can't we start over? No, I said simply. You taught me what to outgrow. She sobbed openly now, shoulders shaking. I hope, I added, you find whatever you were looking for when you walked away. Her voice cracked. I just want the version of you who loved me. He's gone, I said. You helped bury him. She broke down completely, covering her face as she whispered my name. I stepped past her and opened the door. Meeting's over. As I walked away, I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, no ache. Just freedom earned the hard way. As I reached the hallway, one of the team leads, Mark, approached me hesitantly. Is it really done? He asked. It is, I said. We're moving forward without him. Mark nodded slowly. People were waiting for this. He made the place miserable. I know, I replied. Today was overdue. He lowered his voice. And Emily? She made her choices, I said. Now I'm making mine. Mark sighed. You handled it better than anyone expected. I'm not here to reenact the past, I said. I'm here to run this place. He gave a small smile. Then you're off to a strong start. I walked toward my office, feeling the weight of finality settle in, not heavy, just real. Inside, I sat down and let the quiet surround me until Emily's faint sobs faded down the hall. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I only felt the clean, sharp truth that I had finally grown past everything that once controlled me. I whispered to myself, this is just the beginning. I leaned back in my chair and let a slow breath slip out, thinking about how far I'd come. The version of me who once begged for scraps of affection was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood his own worth and refused to settle for anything less than before. I walked into the office early, feeling the quiet settle around me like a promise of the life I was finally choosing. Sophie met me at the doorway and smiled in that gentle way that always made my guard drop. She said, "Rough morning?" I shook my head and answered, "Not rough, just new." She laughed softly and said, "New looks good on you." I told her, "It feels lighter than anything I've had before." We walked to my office together, our steps quiet but comfortable. She said, "I'm proud of how far you've come." I looked at her and replied, "I wouldn't have made it here without you." Her cheeks warmed and she whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." I felt something steady growing between us, something real. Before I could say more, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Emily had written a long apology filled with excuses, regrets, and the same pleas I used to lose sleep over. I didn't open it fully, I just swiped it away. Sophie glanced at me and asked, "Bad news?" I said, "Old news." She nodded as if she understood every bruise hidden under my calm. "You don't owe the past any more pieces of you," she said. I breathed out slowly and replied, "I know that now." Later that afternoon, Mark rushed in and said, "You need to see the news about Daniel." I opened the article and saw the headline announcing his arrest for fraud. Mark muttered, "Looks like karma finally clocked in." I answered, "He made his choices." Sophie read over my shoulder and whispered, "And you made yours." I nodded, feeling no bitterness, only the clean relief of distance. As the day ended, Sophie asked, "Dinner tonight?" I smiled and said, "Yeah, I'd like that." She grinned and replied, "Good, because I'm not letting you hide in that office forever." I laughed, surprised by how easy it felt to let someone in again. We walked out together, her hand brushing mine like an invitation. She murmured, "You deserve a life that doesn't hurt." I said, "I'm finally choosing one." As we reached the parking lot, the evening air felt warm, carrying the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty anymore but open. Sophie leaned on her car and asked, "So what does freedom taste like?" I laughed and answered, "Like breathing without waiting for pain." She stepped closer and said, "Then keep choosing people who don't add weight to your chest." I looked at her and replied, "That's the plan." She smiled and whispered, "Good, because I want to be part of that plan." I felt my chest loosen in a way I hadn't felt in years, not with nostalgia but with hope. I said, "Then stay close." She touched my arm lightly and replied, "I'm right here." As we stood there, I realized that my life no longer revolved around what I had lost but around what I was building now. Sophie unlocked her car and said, Come on, let's get dinner before you talk yourself out of being happy. I laughed again and followed her, feeling something inside me settle, not like a burden but like a foundation finally strong enough to stand on without trembling. I knew my new life truly started. I stepped onto the old bridge and whispered, I never thought I'd come back here. The chill in the air pressed against my cheeks, but I breathed it in like I needed proof I was still alive. This is where I fell apart, I said, gripping the railing. Where I thought I was finished. Sophie's footsteps approached softly behind me. You sure you want to do this now? I need to, I told her. I need to face the version of me that broke here. She moved beside me, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. Then talk to him, she said. Tell him what you wish someone told you that night. I let out a shaky laugh. I'd probably tell him, get up, idiot. She nudged me. Try again. I stared down at the dark water. I'd tell him, you're hurting now but you won't always be. I'd tell him, this pain is going to carve you into someone stronger. And would he believe you? She asked. No, I admitted. But he needs to hear it anyway. Sophie squeezed my hand. Then say it for you. I closed my eyes. I thank the pain, I whispered. I thank every night I cried here. I thank the emptiness that felt like it would swallow me. Because without it, I wouldn't be who I am now. Sophie let out a breath. That's the man I see. The one who didn't give up. I almost did, I said quietly. But you didn't, she replied. And that's why you're here. I felt the truth settle inside me like a slow, steady light. I thought Emily destroyed me, I said. But really, I just didn't know who I was without her. Sophie tilted her head. Do you forgive her? No, I said. But I forgive myself. She nodded like she'd been waiting for me to say it. Then let's leave this place behind. I took one last look at the bridge, the cracks in the pavement, the rust on the railing, the memory of rain-soaked clothes and a shaking voice begging the night for answers. I'm not that guy anymore, I told myself. You ready? Sophie asked. Yeah, I said. More than ever. We walked back to the car. The door shut with a soft thud, and when the engine started, something inside me felt like it finally started too. Sophie reached over and intertwined her fingers with mine. You're quiet, she said. I'm thinking. About what? About how strange it feels, I said. To finally feel free. She smiled. Freedom looks good on you. I'm still getting used to it. That's okay, she said. I'm not going anywhere. I glanced at her, at the kindness in her eyes that never asked me to be anything but myself. Thank you, I said. For what? For staying. She squeezed my hand again. Then keep driving. Drive into whatever comes next. I looked at the road ahead, the night stretching open like a promise. And maybe for the first time, I finally believe in my own strength. And as the bridge faded in the rearview mirror, I whispered the final truth I'd been carrying for too long. She left me because I was useless, but losing her is what made me become the man I am today.